Hey guys. Let's see. How's everybody doing? It is Sunday and we are here. I've got some things to share today. Hopefully it'll be entertaining, but the jackalopes are warmed up, so a little Berlin school happening today. Let's see, turn that down just a bit in my ear. Let me know how the sound is. I had to reconfigure everything a little bit again. If it's not ducking my voice under my voice, let me know. Let's see. Andy, Animotion. Hey, my case. Audrey, Eric. Let's see. All right, and Andy. Everybody's being polite and saying hi. Are you really playing a Hydra 6 on Channel 6? Yes. So, I'll talk about that in a minute. So, let me make a little noise here. It's a blessing and a curse, Audrey. I'm going to talk about that. There are some problems. Make a little noise here for a few minutes. Hey, Steve. That's high praise, Steve. Tearing away from the guy at 2 for this? If you have to run, I understand. that'll do for now. So let's see. Get this running. Just sustain that in the background. Let's see. What do I want to do here? All right, we'll hold that for a minute. So let's see. Who else do we have? James. Welcome, James. Good to see you. Happy Sunday. All right, so what's going on? I'm going to let this run in the background for a minute. So a few things. Let me show you. So I posted a thing. I said I found a really cool laptop stand because the modular went away, and the modular was sort of resting on these two laptop stands that were freaking everybody out. It was very stable, but people were freaking out. And I found a better laptop stand. Let me show you here. So hopefully I didn't screw this up and the sound won't drop out. So here's a photo. That's the new laptop sitting on its new stand. If I zoom out a little bit here, it's more like that. And so went and did get a Hydrasynth Deluxe, but it arrived with some problems. So basically it was a rather expensive laptop stand. I was really not happy a few days ago. But it's a little weird. I've got a story about the Hydrasynth when it first came out. I picked one up right away when it first came out many years ago, right? What is it, 4 years ago now? And I liked the way it sounded. It was a little thin at the time, a little quiet, but the software was real buggy, and it wasn't playing nice. Like it would crash if you sent it MIDI patch changes over DIN MIDI, things like that, which is just not acceptable. So I ended up sending it back, and I've been waiting. And I've seen firmware come and firmware come and firmware come. So they're up to firmware 2 point whatever at this point. And had one in my cart, was thinking about it. Using the Hydrasynth, this laptop stand is also a good use for it, yes. It's built in. It comes with an extension specifically for laptops or whatever unit you want to stick on the side here, pedals or something. But got it delivered, plugged it in, and just weird stuff started happening. Use the patch change dial, and it would freak out and just blast full max volume white noise out its outputs and just do crazy stuff. Power cycle it, weird things would happen. Knobs would stop responding. I was like super unhappy in the first 12 hours. I get online and I see it's just a sea. Now, granted, you go on the internet. Nobody gets on the internet and says, I bought this thing and it's fine and there's no problem, because if there's no problem, they're busy using it, right? Playing that instrument or whatever. So you go online and I see that in the last 6 months, there's been a huge swell in the number of people going, I just picked up a Hydrasynth Deluxe and it's really broken. And it's got this strange problem with like sending out random noise when you change the patches and locking up and crashing and stuff. And I'm just like, oh, why didn't I do some research before I bought this thing? And now I'm like, then I'm really being like grumpy and I'm like, oh, so that's why it was on sale, you know? So anyway, go through all the various support suggestions from people. They're like, update the firmware, burn the factory, downgrade the firmware, and then update it. And did the dance, held the buttons down, did the Vulcan nerve pinch stuff on it, and it just wasn't getting any better. And so I sent a cry for help DM to Task Boy, the only other local Hydrasynth owner I know, and he's on vacation in Disney World. So, and I knew that, I just forgot. So I'm like, Anyway, so get this. It's behaving perfectly now. And the only thing I did was I swapped out the power supply that came with it, because the manual says that the Hydrasynth requires a 12-volt power supply with 2 amps. It says 1 amp minimum, and on the Hydrasynth Deluxe, it says 2 amps minimum. And so I looked at the power supply, and it's 2 amp. It's an HSM branded power supply. It's got all the, confirmation stamps on it, UL listed, all these things that you wouldn't see on a piece of garbage power supply, a $3 power supply from AliExpress or something. It looks like it's rated well. But on a whim, I'm like, well, there's sort of two Hydrasynths sort of crammed together in here, which is, I guess, why the rating went from 1 amp minimum to 2 amps minimum. But there's a lot of LEDs on here, and they're all full bright. And LEDs can draw a lot of amperage. So I'm like, let me plug in a different power supply, one that's 12 volts. And I go digging through the closet. There's that box that everyone's got. It's the rat's nest of like all the random power supplies that you still have from all the gear you've ever bought but don't have anymore. You still have the power supply floating around. And I found a 12 volt 5 amp power supply. I plugged that in. Works perfectly. I'm like, that's weird. All right. I'm a techie nerd kind of guy. I know how to reproduce bugs. So I'm like, okay, well, let's swap the 2 amp back in, because if it's just amperage, if I swap back to the 2 amp supply, it should break, right? It should get weird again. Swap back to the 2 amp supply. It works perfectly. That's very frustrating. I frickin' hate Heisenbugs, uncertain bugs. Oh, those are absolutely annoying. So, I don't know. So I left it on, let it burn in, went back every few hours, played a bit, spun the dials, did everything. I can't make it break now. Now I found a bunch of other little weird things, like the sequencer will freak out timing-wise and lock up periodically, and you got to power cycle it. So there's still bugs in the system. But it was terrible, like deafen you. I tore my headphones off to throw them across the room. That was so loud in my ears suddenly. It's crazy. That's not happening anymore. So what was a synth became a very expensive laptop stand, is now a synth again. So we'll see what happens. I've got to call into the people I bought it from Sweetwater, and I think I'm going to see if I can buy post-sale one of those 2 or 3 year extended warranties, just in case something goes bad. So anyway, so that's the scope of what's going on with the fancy laptop stand. Now that said, I like this thing. I don't do like synth reviews and stuff, but let's do this. You hush. All right. But if we pull up, you hush. I gotta say, I don't have another synth with a poly aftertouch. The push is nice. The push's sensitivity is a lot different. Hang on, let me flip the push over into poly aftertouch mode real quick. The push, there's like no throw, right? It's pressure. But the key bed on this is pretty nice. I'm not really demonstrating poly aftertouch because it's a monophonic sound, but it feels good. I've played an Osmos, and their keybed is real smushy, and that's fine. That's by design. But you have to get used to it. And I'm not a super fan of the way it feels. This feels real firm. This feels, believe it or not, this reminds me of, it feels like a D50. If you've ever played a Roland D50, that's in pretty good shape. This keybed feels like that, although it's maybe a tiny bit lighter. Oh, you're still image? Sorry, guys. I should flip it back. There we go. Sorry. Although I don't have this keybed on camera. Sorry. I'm not, I just don't have like a bazillion cameras. But the Hydrasynth is fun. I like the fact that there's 2 layers and I can do a split that does something interesting with each hand. So, all right, what am I missing? Let's see. Hey, 5 Pinned In, welcome aboard. Let's see. Just keep this running here. Congrats that I solved the puzzle. I didn't solve the puzzle. It's uncertainly, mysteriously fixed. So we'll see what happens. Yeah, isn't it weird? I would expect that if it didn't like the 2 amp, it would die. It would start behaving badly when it went back to 2 amp, and it didn't. And I went like a good 24 hours of leaving it on that 2 amp supply. Power cycled it maybe every 10 hours or so. Like thermal, I don't know, let it heat up, let it cool down. My house is pretty cold. We keep the thermostat on 62 Fahrenheit. But I just can't reproduce the problem. I don't know. Maybe it had to settle. I don't know. After the trip. I don't know. It is nice. So I wanted a Hydrosynth and I want to take 5. And I'm selling the modules out of the modular to fund those purchases. And to motivate myself to sell them, I put a Hydrosynth and Take 5 in my cart at Sweetwater. By the way, if you put some stuff in your cart at like Perfect Circuit or one of the synth vendor websites and just leave it in your cart and walk away, you'll get an email that says, "Hey, did you forget to check out?" And if you leave it in there for a few days, you'll get another email that says, "Here's a 10% off code you can use to help you finish that purchase." Now, I don't know if that was just timing, like I hit a sale that they were going to have anyway, or if there's some sort of algorithm that says if they sit with a thing in their cart for a really long time, maybe give them a little nudge by give them a 5%, 10% off coupon or something. But it does happen. Anyway, so I had to Take 5 and Hydrosynth sitting in the cart. And I was at work just showing the cart to Task Boy, who I work with, and we were like, the Hydrosynth is $300 more than the Take 5. It's like $1,800. The Take 5 is like $1,500, and we pull up the cart, and it shows them both the same price. I'm like, what? Pull it up, and it went on sale for April. So all the Hydrosynths are a certain amount off, $300 for the deluxe, etc. And so that seemed like it was fate telling me, yeah, you should just pick up that Hydrosynth now. And I'd sold enough modules that I could just pay cash for it, so that's what we did. But then it got here, and it turned into a laptop stand. So I was like, okay, so why was it on sale? Was it on sale because this is a batch that might be problematic? It was still in its like all its shipping, drop shipping kind of container, stuff like that. It obviously wasn't a repack. If it was a really professional repack. But no, I mean, like the sealant was on the keyboard and stuff like that. But although there were no peel-off things on any of the displays, I don't know if that's a thing they do or not, but the keybed had the peel-off stuff on it. Is that the cat on the keyboard? Nice. What's your cat's name, Animotion? We were cat people before we were dog people. So before we had Bubba, we had 2 cats. We had a long hair named Mrs. Brisby. Yes, named after the mouse from the book movie. And we had a cat. We had a cat named Puppy. And that was because when he was a kitten, my wife, just for whatever reason, kept having this like mental disconnect and kept referring to the kitten as a puppy, and the name stuck. And then he started responding to it. So we had a cat named Puppy once upon a time. Yeah, I hear you. It's not so much sneaking it past your other half. You have to come up with a legitimate reason why you would be happier, and then convince them that they want you to be happy. Right? That's how it works. Cat's name is Jessie. That's a good. That's a good name for a cat. Purchased some bee stock and stuff at Sweetwater. It looked like it was brand new. They really did. Yeah, so this might be a repack. I don't know. I will say this about the panel. You can't see it, but the panel is this brushed aluminum. It's got a texture on it that is like finger oil super glue. Like all I do is just, I'm not an oily guy, but if I just so much as like brush my hand across it, it leaves a trail. It has something to do with like the oil getting into the actual grooves of the brushed aluminum or whatever the surface is and refracting in a way that it's really obvious to see which buttons. I can tell you at a glance like which buttons I've touched on this thing. Granted, be all of them. So basically there's a little smear, dark smear around every button. It looks horrifying. So if you're one of those people who like pristine synths, know that the Hydrasynth surface shows finger oil like really well. Your wife scans the room every time she comes in. That's hilarious, 5-pin. All right. So anyway, that's that. Now, someone asked, I had a question. So today, the musical performance today may be thin. So if you want to run, you can. I'm talking a lot today. Someone asked a question about Berlin School, and we were talking about choosing notes. What are we in today? We're in A minor today. And someone asked me, they said, when you're making a bed using arpeggiation, or you've got a couple lines that are layered together, and you're following a chord progression, he said, if you want to do something like use, what are they called? So I'm not a theory guy, so you guys I'm going to watch the chat. You guys enlighten me here. There's a thing called, I think it's secondary dominance, right? So like when you play the fifth above the chord you want to go to, and you play it as a seventh, that's a secondary dominant, and it leads to that chord. I'll get to that in a minute. Anyway, somebody asked, they said, hey, when you're doing Berlin School, how do secondary dominants work? And so me not being a theory guy, I played with it. And on a grid, secondary dominants are really easy, super easy to figure out. And so I thought I would just demonstrate and show people. And I may get it wrong, so you guys will have to correct me, right? Let's see. Your partner and you keep your funds separate beyond that point. Yeah, I think that's good. We keep our funds separate, except that Sarah doesn't provide any income. So she's the business person in the house. She like runs the house like a business. Like she gets a budget, and she's like draconian in her tight-fisted, well-managed household budget. So it's been 30 years, right? I just shut up and let her take over. She's good at it. Anyway. All right. So I'm going to talk a little tiny bit about theory here. On the grid, and I think we can see the grid. All right. So let's change this so it's a little bit more contrasty. We'll do it that. All right. Those blue notes are easier. Okay. So we're in A minor. A minor sounds like this. All right. When you're on a grid, all right, from here, there are 7 notes in a scale. 8, if you think about it, repeating. 7, 8. All right. And if you give each of these notes in the scale, the position they're in, a number, they refer to that as a scale degree. So the first note in the scale is the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8th octave, also the 1. All right. Now, that's for the scale. Those are the scale degrees. But if you're working in a key, here I am in A minor, if you just pick any note, all right, I can see where it is. If this is 8 or 1, this is 1 down. This is the 7th degree of the A minor scale. Okay, I don't care too much about what letter it actually is. But for me, from a grid perspective, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That's the 7th degree of this scale. All right. But also relative to this thing, if I count away from this distance-wise, if I want to find the 5th of that thing, I just go from it and count up 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So this note is the 5th, relatively speaking, of this one. And this is the 7th degree of this scale. All right. I hope that makes sense. Now, what this is useful for is people are like, I've got a chord progression. It goes like this. It's going to go 1, 3, 7, 6. All right, so what these notes are is in my scale, the actual scale degree of that note, 1, 3, 7, 6. That's a chord progression. So if you go look at chord progressions, you'll see them written out in Roman numerals. It'll say 1, 4, 5, right? I'm not going to get into major versus minor. I'm just say they use numbers to indicate these are the chords that are in the scale. So if I'm doing this 1, 3, 7, 6, that's a chord progression I want to play. Let me play this as with our arpeggiators playing the chord. That's 1. That's 3. That's 7. And that's 6. All right. All right. So there's this concept that somebody asked a question on the comments. He said, how do you do secondary dominants? Well, what a secondary dominant is useful for is chord progressions can get boring. So if I go 1, 3, 7, or 7, yeah, 6. And you do that over and over and over again, and it's fun. You write a melody over it, things like that, arpeggiate that. That's what I advocate when people are making Berlin School. I'm like, I say, you tend to drone more. You don't necessarily jump through a lot of chords in a progression when you're doing Berlin School. But, you can imagine holding this out for 16 bars. And then you're going to move through these progressions. Well, they're like, I want to use, it gets boring, I want to change it up. Well, what a secondary dominant is instead of jumping from 1 right over to 3, changing making that chord change, you go from 1 to the dominant of that. So if this is where I'm going to go to, this is totally positional on a grid. If I'm going to go from here to here as a chord sort of progression, and I want to stick something else in between there that sounds good, we go to the place you're going to end up, and you find the 5th of that, the secondary dominant, which for this would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, this note. So instead of going from here to here, I go from here to there to there. All right, and so it sounds like instead of, that's the normal progression, I can go. I can make that movement. Now, I may be doing that wrong, and on the grid it's hard to do inversions. Well, it's not hard to do inversions, but it's hard for me to do them on the fly. So I use what are called shell chords. I don't play out the full chord. I just pick 2 notes out of every chord to play. So if this is my 1, and this is where I'm going to be, this is going to be my 3. I was saying 7, wasn't I? I meant 3. 1, 3, 7, 6. If I use the insert the 5th of each one in here, I'm going to read the chat. I see it flying by. Right, you can use that as a transitional thing. Where am I going? Yeah, so. Oop. Something like that. I don't know. I'm working on it. So I can't remember the fellow's name, the commenter who said, how do you do secondary dominance? So I'm not helping you very much. I'm maybe making it worse. But if you're going to go through a progression where you're going to go through some scale degrees, the landing zone you're in, look for the fifth above that, and that's the chord you can stick in between there to try something. So your mileage may vary. Give it a shot. I'm going to keep playing with it, and hopefully in a week or two, I'll know what the fuck I'm talking about. But it's super fun. I'm having a good time with that. So let's see. Ben's here. Hey Ben, you can probably talk about secondary dominance for a while. Let's see. Ben knows what he's talking about there. Let's see. Let me catch up here. I get everyone's name wrong, Ben. So you're welcome to do mine. Hey, Davi, welcome. Let's see who else has shown up here. Hey, the Quasi Wabbit. Anyway, so it's something to think about. It's wherever you're going to go to from a root position of that chord. If I'm going from here to here, I can transition through the fifth above that. So if I keep doing that through the whole progression, something like that. I enjoy it. It's interesting. So if you need a resource, search on YouTube for Signal Music Studios. I've talked about him before. He's like my go-to for theory. And I just consume his stuff and then try and fit it into what I'm doing. Signal Music Studios is a good guy. I think his name's Jake Lizzo. All right, so enough of this. Let's make some Berlin School. All right. Now, this is going to screw with me because due to the arpeggiation, it feels like it's 3, but the meter's actually in 4. So I may have to delete this pattern and start over. Let's put a bass line under this, short one. Ooh, so here's something. You hear that vibrato on the bass? You may like that. I'm not a fan of that. So what that is that's me being in poly aftertouch mode on a synth that doesn't like poly aftertouch. I mean, it does, but the patch is not configured to handle it correctly. And so it gets ugly. Hey, Jeff. You could smash the like button if you like smashing like buttons. Thank you for the push there, but it's not required. With a feather duster. That's what my son does with spiders. All right. All right. Let's do a quick rundown of what synths we're playing with tonight. Or this afternoon, I guess. So we got a mod wave. Our too much delay, too much reverb pluck. And I went for a pluck that's sort of string-like, a little car plussy. Not so much a bell. Are you guys going to collab? Who's collaborating? I would love to have any group from this chat collaborate. I'd buy it, put it on Bandcamp. All right. Then we've got a little wavetable synth out of Ableton, which was in here last week. And then it's twin with a slightly different timbre. Oh, another theory thing. I learned this from that guy, Signal Studio, Jake Lizzo. So if you play a major chord, major triad, and then add a augmented fifth, all right, pattern looks like this, right? It's like instant James Horner Star Trek music or feel, right? And if you take that whole shape and you just move it up diagonally one, so that's an augmented fourth, right? You get this. You get the motion from like Wrath of Khan. Anyway, he's got a video called God Chords. That's what he talks about. Talks about overused sci-fi chord progressions. All right, let's see what else we cooking up here. We have the Summit. I love this Summit horn. Sometimes you don't need an ass load of oscillators. This is just one saw. Some delay and reverb. Yeah. And then third wave, doing a little wavetable sweep. Let's see what that sounds like a couple octaves down. It's getting pretty not tonal down there. So this is the third wave, to be clear. All right, and we've got a cobalt. Haven't changed that since last week. Let's bring it up an octave. And then we've got the bass that everyone knows, and then the hydrosynth. And the hydrosynth is a split. So this is one I made because I make everything with a 3-octave 16th note arpeggiation because it's just fun. It's like the standard first patch I made. This is the only thing I've made on here so far. So you give me a synth, if it's got an arpeggiator in it, I'm going to make this sound or something like it. And then it's split onto this expressive sort of horn. So that's what's going on. Let's see. What else am I missing here? You arpeggiate for me. There we go. All right. What am I missing in the chat here? Oh, Redwalks. Hey, guys. Guy, welcome, guys. Let's see. Yep, we're ARPing away. The Summit reverb is very good. So one of the things I need to do is do a comparison between the Hydrosynth and the Summit, because their architectures are very similar at a coarse level, at a high level, right? It's two other synths sort of bolted together. And I need to play with those. I noticed, one thing I noticed about this version of the Hydrosynth, once it got past the weirdness, the strange like amperage weirdness, is that this is much, much louder, just coming out at line level, than it used to be. And I don't know if that's a firmware update or what, but just on a knitted sawtooth patch, a fresh knit single oscillator, it's much louder, and the noise floor seems to be lower. So I don't know. I'll do a comparison between that and the Summit, and just for giggles, not because one's better than the other. So yeah, I like the split patch. I need to get one more camera or something so you can watch that and the grid at the same time, because the grid only has 3.5 octaves. So like playing a split on the grid is not fun. What I would love, I bet I could do this with Max. One thing on the Take 5 that I'm looking forward to is you can take it split and tell it to drop the left-hand split an octave or 2 octaves. I'd love to be able to define, like, these 4 rows on the push are 2 octaves lower than the rest of it, like have some split between bottom 4 and top 4. I think I could do that in Max. I'm pretty sure I can do that in Max. That would be nice. Something to think about. Country Fair 74, hey, welcome. Do you use a MIDI router or a through box? If that question was for me, I use a bit of both. I've got an 8-port hub, and so I've got 8 ports to route things through, and then some of those lines from the port get split into splitters, right? So like the Hydrosynth, I haven't messed with the MPE on the Hydrosynth at all, but an entire port is dedicated to the Hydrosynth, because MPE, I believe, somebody correct me if I'm wrong here, I think MPE wants all 16 channels of the port to do its MPE thing. Let me know. Maybe it's only half of that, but so the Hydrosynth is taking up an entire port from the, it's a Mo2 MIDI interface, a 128 Express, nothing fancy. I've seen some really nice MIDI routers that do combinations of DIN and USB and good smart things. I have this and it works. And if it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? So if it dies, I'll probably pick up one of those nicer ones. But we'll see where that goes. Hey, Enzo, I did get the Deluxe. You missed my rant about it. I got the Deluxe and it behaved really weird for the first 36 hours, and now it's okay. And I'm not sure if I fixed it or if it fixed itself or if it's a ticking time bomb. So I don't know. I'm going to talk to my rep that I bought it from and be like, hey, I need to buy one of those extended warranties just in case it explodes in the next year or two. But it's behaving now, but the software is a little buggy. There's still bugs in the Hydrosynth. So I am using Hydrosynth firmware 2.01, the most recent one. And that did not help at all. If you go to the Hydrosynth Facebook group, there's a user named Bubba Stark, and it's a picture of my dog. That's me, basically complaining and then dumping all of the information I found in there. Because I swapped out the power supply and it started behaving normally. And then when I swapped it back to the original power supply, it continued to behave normally. So weird, undefined behavior is very frustrating. Let's see. Jeff, the instrument has a split mode. I thought you were about to say it's got a split mode that'll do the octave shift that I want this one to do, but that's cool. Do I mean that the particular unit is louder now than it was? Do you mean that this one is louder than the first one you tried? This one is louder. So my original Hydrosynth from 4 years ago was the desktop module with the velocity sensitive buttons on it. And it was very quiet. Like I had to turn the gain up on the audio interface way up. I mean, I cranked its volume all the way up and I turned the gain up on the audio interface to really get a signal in the, -12 to -18 dB range. This seems louder. And I don't know if that's something they changed or it's because the hardware's different. I don't know. I'm not complaining because like the Cobalt 8 for modal, it's the quietest synth in the world. It's like it's like line level is like super low. And I know a lot of synths have additional things in line, like inline compression and gain, gain stage effects and things like that. I'm pretty sure on the Hydrasynth there's a mutator for gain, not distortion, but just literally for gain. And maybe that's engaged, but on the knit patch, it's much quieter. I mean, it's much louder than I remember it. I don't have scientific measurements from the old one to know, but it just, I don't know, feels better. That could be just like shopping bias. Like I bought this one, and so obviously this one's better than the first one I had. But from a software buggy firmware perspective, it is not as buggy as the old one. I could repeatedly blow up the version 1.0 firmware Hydrasynth by just sending it patch changes too fast over DIN MIDI. Like no problem. Which, not to pick on ASM, I can also do that to the Moog Minotaur. If you send the Moog Minotaur patch changes or MIDI CCs too many too fast, it overloads its buffer or whatever, and the whole system panics. So I'm not picking on Hydrasynth. My Moog synth does the same thing. So anyway, let's see. James, you got to run. Have fun, man. Good to see you. Let's see. Redbox has not updated his firmware. It seems okay. MPE generally uses more and more channels per voice. And it should be dedicated. Yeah, all right, so I've given it an entire port, and we'll see what happens. Rob, hey Rob, thanks for coming, man. Just haven't by to say hello. Well, I haven't by back to you, man. Hello. Let's see. Stopping by. Cool. Let's see. You can set up the instrument for that. Cool. Good evening from Germany. Hey, Helikal Coil. Nice. If this is your first time here, welcome. Your handle looks familiar. Maybe you have been here before, but regardless, welcome aboard. Yeah, Ken Flux is like in the Facebook group all over the place. People keep referencing him as like one of the leaders. So, and then Cobalt is whisper quiet. Yeah, it's a great synth though. But Steve, you sold yours. I understand. Life is a long series of pets and or gear. Does what work over USB? Enzo, let me know. Let's see. Do it in the DAW. More synths for laptop stands. Yeah, that was it. This was when it first arrived. For the first 36 hours, it was just a really expensive laptop stand. So hence my post. I was really grumpy when I posted that to the community forum. So, all right, let's see. So it's 2:58. I've been going for about an hour. I'm probably going to wind down. You guys who just popped in, I'm sorry. I only stream about an hour on Sundays. Let's see. Redwalk says the Cobalt Third Wave Summit Peak. Didn't say hello. Nice. MIDI CC patch changes. The CC patch changes crashed the original Hydrasynth, and it crashes the Moog Minotaur right now. If you send them too fast, send too many too fast. Or at least that's my experience, right? So it could be my unit is weird. It may not be all of them, but your mileage may vary. Steve says your space is limited. So you need to be, if it needs to be small or really good gear. So that's why you sold the Cobalt. Is that what you're saying? All right. Yeah, it's over DIN. Will it crash if you do it over USB? I don't know. Only because I never use USB MIDI ever. The only time I ever use USB is to update firmware or stuff like that. And it's not because I think it's better. It's just that it's simpler for me. So all of my MIDI is one way. Here's the nerd thing. My MIDI routing is an acyclic directed graph. It goes in one direction. Nothing comes back. So when I play on the Hydrasynth, Ableton doesn't see it. There is nothing going from the MIDI out on this synth back into my system, which means that I can't record what I play on the Hydrasynth. I can just play for you guys through it, right? If I'm writing music, the way my studio is set up, in order to record, I must play on the grid. I have to play on the push because only the MIDI goes from the push into Ableton out to the synths. It never comes back. Now, what that also means is that I can't grab a filter knob on a synth, a physical synth, and turn it and record that automation. I can't do that. I have to map it to a knob on the push and use that. Now, luckily, the knobs on the push feel awesome, and that works just fine for me. But like on the Minimoog's filter is not addressable over MIDI. So I can't do that on there. So if I want to record manual filter sweeps on the Minimoog, I have to record audio in here, go over there, and actually play it. So the way I've got my studio set up, my MIDI never gives me any trouble, but it's also a little bit limited in that there's no round trip. I can't go play and come back. Now I do have a controller keyboard over there for all the modules. So I've got a rack sort of wall over there with a whole bunch of desktop modules in it because there's no room on the desk. And over there, that's module central, and there's an 88 key SL Studio controller there. That's running into Ableton. So if I want to play over there and record, I can hit record over here, run over there and play it. That works. But yeah, I try and keep things as simple as possible, but I never use USB MIDI because this works and I'm old and grumpy and set in my ways. So that's the deal. Let's see. Red Walks, yeah, late, whatever. It's all good. You can always watch it later if you're really interested. Today was me misrepresenting some music theory that I don't basically understand. There was a big segment about that. So, you'll hear me talk about it, but then I'll reference someone else and say, go to this guy's channel to learn about this stuff. I was just fooling around. The MIDI routing works fine. Your MIDI goes to infinity. Yeah, there's no loops. There's no possibility of having any MIDI loops in here. That's one thing that's actually in the Hydrasynth manual. It says it's super sensitive to MIDI loops. Make sure you don't ever have one because you'll need to reboot it because it gets weird. It's in the manual. I never have to worry about local on-off issues. That's absolutely right. Last year at the New England Synth Festival, I performed with the third wave was one of my bits for the performance. I turned local off for that performance because I was going to use it as a controller, and then I promptly finished the performance, went to the petting zoo, put the synth there, and then spent 2 hours trying to debug why isn't my keyboard working. I thought I had broken my synth, and someone goes, "Did you turn local off?" Yep. And that's what it was. So yeah, it makes you crazy. Let's see. I sing the Body Electric, a post vodka head. Nice. Those days are past for me, but you do you. It's all good. Never change a running system. Yeah, that's true of all things. So, synth dementia. All right. Well, I think that's probably it. Thank you, everybody, for showing up. I appreciate it. I only did 2 little blurbs, musically speaking, but, told you the story of the Hydrasynth, the world's most expensive laptop stand. And really, that's about it. I will see you guys on the Discords or on your channels. I'm going to try and make a concerted effort to watch other people's streams this week, other than Andy Synchrotron. He's easy because it's 5 a.m. on Saturday, and I got nothing else to do, and my dog wakes me up at 5. So it's usually feed the dog and listen to Synchrotron's stream. For the rest of you who stream like in the evenings or the afternoons, I often miss those just because life, But I'm going to try. We'll see what happens. The hour passes really quick. I'm going to try next week. I'm going to try and do a little bit more performance. I might try and prepare something. Someone asked me to do an arrangement of 3 sea shanties for them. So I actually have like some actual music work to do this week. Not as electronic music or Berlin School. He's a guy who he is a stage performer, and they're doing a musical, and he sent me the names of these 3 shanties. He's like, I need an accompaniment that we could sing along to for these. So I'm putting together some shanties. I used to be in a shanty band a long time ago. I'm not doing a great job. I'm just getting a bare minimum done, and they're going to sing over it, and so they'll make it sound good because they'll be singing, and that's the point. The accompaniment is supposed to just sort of stay in the background, but that is a project for this week. We'll see what happens. All right, let's see. No shame. I sing the Body Electric. No shame. That's totally fine. I would drink if I could, but my cardiologist has made it quite clear to me that if I so much as smell alcohol, my heart will explode. So we're not going to be doing that. Audrey, sorry, got to run. Nope, not a problem. Everybody, thanks very much. I am going to kill the stream. I will talk to you all later. Have fun. See you.